Nikki Hodgson, journalist and author, and Noah Khogali, Conservative councillor for Strathern, join me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nikki, I haven't seen you for ages.
I know. Well, I was in with Christo a few weeks ago. Rude. You weren't here, but I mean, I think something happened.
Did it?
I don't know. There was a reason. I can't remember now. Yeah.
I think I had a day off.
Yeah, I just missed you then.
Oh, thank you. That was very good. Well, Nikki, I'm going to start with you, if I may, because we've been saying there's been this great sort of tumbleweed moment where we're all waiting for this budget. Businesses are very upset about this. No one knows what's going on. They're not employing people. Meanwhile, we're talking about inheritance tax. We're talking about air passenger duty. We have no idea what's about to happen. The front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning, Rees prepares a tax triple whammy. This is Rachel Rees. She basically is going to freeze the income tax threshold bands, which we didn't think she would do. They're going to raid inheritance tax, and they're also going to put up fuel duty by as much as 7p. Did people know what they were voting for?
No, because we know that all governments break manifestos. Which was the last government that didn't break a manifesto pledge? Can you remember?
But that's terrible. These should be legally binding contracts.
Well, maybe they should, and maybe that's something we need to debate in future. But actually, let's just think about that tax freeze. That was something brought in by the Tories.
It was.
They had proposed that
it's due to run out.
Yes, it's due to run out. So all they're doing is renewing something that's already in. Isn't it just
but hang on a minute. But hang on a minute. The Labour Party says they're not going to increase tax on working people. But this fiscal drag will increase tax on working people. Therefore, it has broken its own manifesto promise.
Well, it's technicality. That's how they're explaining it, isn't it? I agree with you, actually, but I don't mind it because we've got to fill the £40 billion hole.
Where's the 40 billion come from?
Well, that's what this is part of it. It's going to raise 7 billion.
It's made up. It's a made-up figure.
Well,
20 billion made up. Even the IFS have no idea where that came from.
Well, I mean, they've come up with 40 billion from somewhere, and they must have documents to prove it. But we do know Rachel Rees is a plagiariser. I mean, it could have come from anywhere. I don't remember when she got into trouble for writing somebody.
Yes, I do.
Using somebody else's writing. After that, I was down on her from that minute. We talked about that at the time.
We did.
So I'm still amazed that she ever got to this position of power.
So, Noah, I have said for a long time I hate this expression, working people, because as far as I can understand, most people work. So they say they won't raise taxes on working people, and if this is a technicality, by actually freezing those income tax bands so that you get dragged into higher rates. So at the moment, up to 12,500 you pay nothing. From 12,500 up to 50,000 it's 20%. Over 50,000 is 40%. So if they freeze those, which they're going to do, more people by the very definition will be dragged into that. So surely working people are going to pay more tax.
Absolutely. And there's a couple really important points here. Number one is that during the general election campaign, when Keir Starmer was asked for a definition of working people, do you remember? He said basically people that couldn't write a cheque, which, number one, weird terminology to use in 2024. I don't know that many people. That might be my age.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a cheque for years.
But also says a lot about the way that they're planning to govern. So far, you've seen every scandal. They've basically resorted to technicalities around wording to get their way out of it, which says a lot about the way that they're planning to govern. But on top of that, those tax numbers that you've just listed there are even worse. All you need to do is have a look at the marginal tax rate, and the second you get above 50 grand, you could be looking at above 50% marginal tax rate, which basically means on that next pound that you earn, how much money do you actually get home? And once you get above 50 grand, those numbers skyrocket.
But that's the point. Why are we disincentivising people from earning money? Surely we should incentivise people by saying the harder you work, you keep more of your own cash.
But you know Labour doesn't work like that, David. They think the more you earn, the more you have to give. That's socialism.
Well I'm glad you agree with that.
But the thing that I do think is absolutely ridiculous is for the past couple of years, Amazon has paid zero corporation tax in this company. That is such an easy win for the Labour Party. Go after corporations.
So why haven't they?
Because it's to do with being afraid they'll take their business out of our country. They won't invest. We'll have a problem with tech workers. Of course they're not. So go for that. It's so easy.
We also have Ireland on the doorstep, who have a history of trying to hoover up, you know, EU or companies pushed out of the EU and UK looking for low tax. That is the risk that I think every government has had to grapple.
But you come and put 3% on at least.
Yeah, I'm not saying put nothing.
They made £220 million
But I think
profit.
everyone around the country would agree with you.
So
you need
start
to
there.
Well, you need to advise the Labour government. I just want to go back to this freezing the tax bands, because in opposition, Keir Starmer called the freeze a stealth tax on working people. You can be stealthy as you like, but you cannot hide reality. How he's changed.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's very disappointing. I completely agree with you, and you know how I feel about Labour generally, which is I'm a Labour voter.
A
Labour voter.
Are you still a Labour voter?
I'm still a Labour voter. I'm not a Labour member, though.
Okay.
So, you know, I could go to American canvass if I wanted to. Not that I'm going to. I'm too busy.
Well, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But also, the fact is that inheritance tax, this is a bugbear of mine, because you've already paid tax on that. You want to do the best you can for your family. And now they're going to relook at all of this. So instead of the 7 years, so at the moment, if you gift and there's a passage of 7 years, you don't pay any tax on that. They're now looking at extending that to 10 years and also looking at the increment of the tax that you will pay on inheritance tax.
Yeah, look, all of these taxes are very carefully designed so that they won't necessarily hit people right now. So Labour can turn around and go, oh, look, your paycheck's pretty much the same, but don't look at it again when you're going for pay rises, you know, in the spring of next year and employee national insurance, or sorry, business national insurance goes up, because that's the way that they're going to get all this money through the back door. And it's going to be basically their narrative that your, you know, tax bill now hasn't gone up.
Well, you say that, but what about fuel duty? Because if you put up fuel duty by 7p a litre, that will hit people and hurt people. It will hurt nurses and builders and people doing the school run. It's really going to hurt.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's the one that they're probably going to have to tackle head on. And I imagine they're going to try and frame it as an Ed Miliband, you know, get everyone driving EVs type
Which no one wants to do.
On bicycles.
Yeah,
I mean, it'll be cost of living problems. I mean, what they claim is that hopefully, or what they're praying for, is that there'll be enough growth in sort of 3 to 4 years so that by the time people are hit by this higher tax bracket, they'll be able to afford it. That's what they're relying on.
So also, I thought Labour wanted to build houses for young people, 1.5 million homes over 5 years, 300,000 a year, which is exactly the same target as the Conservatives. But at the same time, you're going to have to pay more in stamp duty under a Labour government. That flies in the face of saying to young people, we want you to get on the housing ladder.
Absolutely. And people have a real, you know, block about stamp duty.
Today. What's going on?
Because I've had enough already. I can still be on the left and think what they're doing is a load of rubbish.
Have you been having gin this morning?
No.
National Gin.
Do you know what? Gin is the only thing that makes me weep. Any other alcohol is completely fine, right, and I don't need to cry anymore about Labour right now. But I mean, I'm not completely on your side, David. You know I'm not, because I do believe in this. I do believe in the cash injection for the NHS, but I am desperately worried about the fact that we don't have enough staff, and I believe immigration might be the answer to some of those skilled workers that we need. You know, so that's something you and I definitely disagree on.
Okay, well, not necessarily managed immigration, yes, and making sure that we need to train our own people first before we import people.
Well, we do, but we're going to have
pillage other parts of the world.
Of course, but we're going to have a delay, aren't we? How long does it take to train a doctor? 7 years.
6 years.
6 years, 7 years, right? So, and what we've got the problem of now is all these very junior staff being forced to do very complex medical work that they're not suitably able to do.
Well, I would actually argue we're bringing in cheaper labour, aren't we, Noah? We're bringing in cheap labour, which is underpinning the market. We're actually not bringing in those highly professionalised, highly qualified and highly paid people.
Yeah, so I can't credit them. I've completely forgotten who produced it, but there was a wonderful graph a month or so ago showing basically the trajectory over a lifetime of the strain or benefit for a country for Britain's low-wage migrants or high-wage migrants. And it basically went, high-wage migrants are contributing to the UK economy consistently throughout their lifetime. Brits basically were around the middle, and then low-wage migrants were significantly below.
But like, what you contribute to society is not all about the money you bring in, is it?
I appreciate that.
There are other things you can contribute, and it's important to make that point.
But it does stress that if we've tried to have a system or an immigration system that focuses on high-wage, high-skill migrants, that's not really worked. And that's the most important thing that we've got to get on top of. We've got lots of industries in the UK, farming, for example, who need manpower.
Desperately.
And we need to make sure that they can get that. The problem is that point system that we tried to nick from the Aussies hasn't really worked as well as it was supposed to. It's not about the numbers. I feel like I've come on and said this before. It's not about the raw numbers. It's about where they're going into the workforce. And that's what we need to focus on.
But it's also about how quickly people can work when they come to this country. Because, you know, something that I think is probably quite left-wing and quite radical is that I would let lots of immigrants work much faster. I would get them
whilst
into
they're being processed?
Yes, while they're being processed, depending on what checks you're able to do on them. I'd actually stop just bringing any men in. That's fun. That's pretty radical feminist. Let's only have women and children for a while. I'm serious.
Right.
I'm serious.
I'm
From certain
thinking
countries,
it through.
I'm serious. Because if we are genuinely concerned about a certain cultural misogyny that is born of some of the immigrants that we are bringing in.
Are we talking legal or illegal here?
Well, potentially both. Because it depends on how
but remember that economic...
but hang on a minute. Wait, David, it depends on what we already know about people. It does make sense.
It doesn't make any sense because economic migrants overwhelmingly are men who are 25 and under.
Yeah.
Right, so we can cut that out straight away.
Well, we're trying to cut it out. How many have we had? 27,000 already this year. We've seen a baby die this week.
I know.
It's got to stop.
But doesn't that tell you how desperate people are from whatever they're leaving behind if they will take their baby on a boat? Why don't we find out why they're leaving? I know that sounds so basic.
Because of economic circumstances, war-torn countries.
So then why don't we put our money into improving their lives in the countries that they live in? Then we'd have to increase foreign aid, and you wouldn't be able to cope with that.
I have to get a word in, Nikki. We have to go to a break. We'll continue our head-to-head after this break. Good morning. 8:38, we're in the middle of head-to-head with Nikki Hodgson and Noah Khogali at the moment. Nikki really has flummoxed me by saying she's disappointed with Labour. What about this one, though? Labour is sending almost 100 current and former party staff to the US to campaign for the Democrats in swing states. For the next 2.5 weeks, they're going to be out there canvassing for Kamala Harris in 4 key battlegrounds. This is Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Virginia. Republicans have called it an outrage. Elon Musk said it's illegal. I mean, it's not a great look, is it? If Trump wins, what does that do for the relationship between the new US president and the UK government?
It is very, very odd, but I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong because they're not members of the party anymore. They're not sitting MPs.
They are current and former.
But they're not sitting MPs. They don't have those kinds of rules.
Party members.
You know, but you're allowed to be a paid-up member of anywhere and go travel for.
But do you not think it's
party.
Okay? Let's just ask you.
Tories have been doing that for years.
Well, hang on a minute. Don't you think it's a bit weird that actively recruiting people to go across to the United States to campaign in a foreign election? This is Sophia Patel, Labour's head of operations, says, "Let's show these Yanks how to win elections."
Yeah, I think. Look, ultimately, it's naive. That's what it is. For the governing party to look like they're organising it, even if that isn't necessarily the reality, is just naive. They should have realised they shouldn't have done it. But someone like Farage, you know, went over and stood on a stage.
Yes,
but hang on, he went as an individual. He did not go under a party membership.
This is my point, is that if you're going and you're not in government, then it's probably actually not too bad. But it's the fact it looks like the government organising it. I also think it's really funny that someone in Georgia is going to get a knock on the door from some politics student from Durham trying to tell them about Georgian politics.
Listen, that English accent will do a lot for a lot of people, so that's actually quite a good move, I think.
Well, I'm quite enjoying the idea they knock on a Republican's door.
They'll probably be persuaded by them, that's the point. It's actually a very charming look, having an English accent. I used to live in America and I could get away with murder. No, I mean, I didn't, but...
No,
anyway, but what I was going to say, exactly about Farage, at least that was hiding in plain sight. This isn't. At least we can see what they're doing. I mean, look, politicians who want other politicians in other countries to get in have for years canvassed and met with officials and done lots of things behind closed doors. We know that. That's all on the record. And this is just in plain sight. It's actually better.
I have to say I was gobsmacked. But, of course, they've done it before. They did it in 2016. It has happened. The GMB has been out there as well. It will be interesting. And, of course, we don't have long to wait until the result of the American election. You mentioned earlier on, Nikki, about the NHS. NHS promised billions in the budget. This is Rachel Reeves. Now, you've £40 billion, by the way, which no one has quite worked out where that comes from. Even the IFS can't decide where this 20 billion comes from. The reason that she needs all this cash is she gave all the unions more money. But the NHS is going to be handed billions of pounds in this month's budget. It says that this is on the premise, the government says it's on the premise that the NHS has to make fundamental reforms. Now, Amanda Pritchard has admitted hospital productivity is down. Long waits mean too many people's confidence in the NHS has been shaken. It's rock bottom.
Morale has never been lower for either people using services or people providing them. Money isn't the answer. We know that. Money isn't the answer. And I've worked in the NHS in admin, in surgery and in the cancer department, and what was always baffling to me is why I, as a temp, paid much more than everybody else, was shoved into these positions for 4 weeks at a time, expected to deal with the most horrific cases, circumstances, with no training, just because I was a university graduate that had done Latin and Greek at school, you know? I mean, that was the reality of it. And I love the NHS. I believe in it deeply. I have had my life saved by the NHS several times. I had an incredible pregnancy and birth experience recently when I had my daughter. I have good mental health care, actually, from the NHS, and I've had severe mental health problems in my life. But, you know, what needs to be fixed is the staffing issue, the confidence, the electronic anything, because there are still hordes of rooms with medical records in them on paper, in files.
But do you remember, of course, Cisco was brought in to try and make all the records electronic. It was such a big task, they failed to do so. I mean, it's interesting. I would agree with Nicky. The answer is not money here. We need to fundamentally rethink it. When you look at Aradazi's report, he says the NHS is in a critical condition. It must reform or die. Staffing has gone up by 17%, and yet productivity has fallen by 11%. Shouldn't we be honest with the public and say, actually, the model is outdated, it needs to change?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is my one hope for Wes Streeting, because I think this is something that Conservatives will always struggle to do, is major NHS reform. We'd need to be looking at Europe and going, what works, what gets good outcomes.
Just Europe?
I think Europe is a pretty good place to start. Demographically fairly similar, you know, similar structures of society, have similar problems in terms of an ageing population and an increasing migrant base. You know, these are countries that are comparable. That's the most important thing that this Labour government can do over its next 5 years, if it makes it that far. And that's the legacy that...
Why wouldn't it?
Why wouldn't it?
Well, that's quite an interesting
I've got a Labour voter sitting next to me that 4 months in is saying she's disillusioned.
But it can still be saved. There are people in the Labour Party that I love that need to be promoted that are not in the right positions.
What's the mood in the Labour Party at the moment?
Well, I think the mood is false confidence, because somebody is going to stab Starmer in the back rather sooner than later, and there's going to be a fight for...
Who do you think will?
The leadership. I think it'll be Reeves. She's so ambitious. I don't think she's capable, but I think she'll do it.
Noah.
That's interesting, because if she does that, she can't stay on as Chancellor, and she has spent the last few years building this kind of, you know, semi-authority on it, and basically pushing everybody else out from that sphere. There's basically no other person in the Labour Party who has that kind of authority, even if what she's talking about is nonsense and she is going to, you know, absolutely strip the country for everything it's got. There is no one else who can stand on the stage.
I don't believe that. I mean, I think Yvette Cooper will be a fantastic Prime Minister. She's been in politics for so long. She is humane. She is caring. She understands about people.
So isn't this fascinating? The minute Labour gets into power, they then indulge themselves in a Tory psychodrama where they actually have to remove their leaders.
Like they've been studying what they did and have just expedited it or something.
Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, they didn't have a plan. They thought this was going to be easy. They thought every problem with the country was a Conservative one, and it's quite plainly not. Part of it is a politics issue.
No. They've inherited a lot of terrible Conservative issues, but they can't get out of them quickly, and they're not coming up with the right solution.
I mean, in 3-4 years' time, you can't use that excuse. We inherited an awful position.
Of course not, but it's still early days. OK, I think they've failed miserably, but they have got a chance to turn this around.
Was it the Tory legacy that meant that Sue Gray was basically causing havoc?
Well, is Sue Gray causing havoc? I don't know.
I have to pause. Noah and Nicky will be back after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning to you. Good morning, 8:49 on Saturday, October the 19th. I'm joined by Nicky Hodgson, journalist and author, and Noah Khogali, Conservative councillor for Strathern. Many of you getting in touch. Brian says your female guest is off her rocker. I can guarantee that 0% of those young men coming on boats are here to help the NHS or skilled in any way. They're chancers and they're criminals. Stop pushing this audacious lie.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Audacious lie.
Putting two things together in the wrong way. That's not what I was saying.
No, I know. Lots of other messages as well. Actually, they've been very nice about you, Noah. Your lady guest is verbose and self-important. We've had to mute her. That's Mick. You're really.
I am a broadcaster for a living. What can I say? And I'm northern. I mean, it does cut through.
It certainly does, Nicky. Certainly does. Right, Noah, let's go on to talk about immigration, because we were talking about the 27,000 people or thereabouts that have come here illegally into this country. So under this government, under your government, they have managed to close the Bibi Stockholm. They got rid of Rwanda. There is no deterrent. We're seeing more and more arrivals coming over and people very sadly dying as a result. There is absolutely no plan, which seems to be a sort of recurring theme here for the government. Now, the Chagos Islands, which Keir Starmer very stupidly signed away, I think last week or thereabouts, he now has completely U-turned. He's agreed a Rwanda-style deal to deport migrants who arrive in the Chagos Islands in small boats. So essentially, he's now deporting people who arrive illegally to the Chagos Islands to St Helena, which is 5,000 miles away, which seems rather odd.
Yeah, well, the whole situation is especially weird because it's now ended up with us giving away a really important strategic asset to an ally of China, paying them to take it, and then we deal with the migrant issue. Seems entirely one-sided. Like Keir Starmer walked into that negotiation, or David Lammy walked into that negotiation room, we got absolutely bulldozed. But on the Rwanda-style deal, that, yeah, very, very odd. I think the consistency for Labour just isn't there. Their argument is going to be that Rwanda wasn't safe and that you shouldn't be declaring it as safe, but I think that's probably quite insulting to a Commonwealth member and ally.
And
well, it's not when you've had protests.
Well, let's just go back. But Noah's point is very valid, which is there is no consistency of messaging here. Either you believe in a Rwanda-style plan or you don't. So he cancels Rwanda, but now has implemented a Rwanda-style plan in the Chagos Islands, shoving people into St Helena, by the way, without their say-so. And there are only 4,500 people that live on St Helena.
But his point will be that it's to do with the safety of the country. He wasn't opposed to
What about the safety of the United Kingdom?
But he wasn't opposed to putting somebody in a holding centre. Because, well, look, isn't that your point, actually, proven, David? You didn't want the, Bibi Stockholm and all the rest of it, and we've got rid of those, so that makes people happier in this country. And if you put somebody somewhere else,
deterrent.
But how does having some people in a processing centre thousands of miles away endanger our safety? I mentioned the price of
hotels, right, at the moment. If you look on any budget hotel chain, they're not cheap. And the reason is because they've all been requisitioned by the UK government for asylum seekers. What we want to see in this country is a deterrent. At the moment, there is no deterrent because we have no Rwanda. We've closed the Bibi Stockholm. There is no concerted plan. Now, what I find also interesting is Italy, of course, is now trying to do something similar with Albania. And the EU finally is waking up to the fact that actually with the advent of more right-wing parties and governments across Europe, they're going to have to tackle the migration crisis. As Europe tacks right, we're tacking left.
I would be careful about using that European example too closely because look at the Austrian Chancellor, for example, has tried to suggest that you could treat both Afghanistan and Syria as safe countries. That is obviously completely mental and not something we should be looking at as an example.
But just to go back to Italy for a second, Giorgia Meloni is now facing the judiciary in Italy, which are telling her that Bangladesh is not a safe country. And it isn't a safe country, and it's not a safe country from a climate point. We don't talk about climate migrants enough. Bangladesh is soon going to be completely submerged and nobody will be able to live in it at all. My family are half Bangladeshi, so it's something that we talk about.
Is it our problem in Europe?
It's our problem if those people are in our country and we have no other system of helping them. Help Bangladesh now. Give Bangladesh money now to help them.
OK, let's just go back to the immigration issue, which is obviously this is a huge bone of contention. As a PR person, if you were working for the Labour government, what would you advise them to do?
I would tell them to come up with some plans that they're going to release over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months in stages to give people confidence they are tackling the problem.
So, Noah,
the plans are less important than the releasing the information and giving people confidence that they are dealing with
And there is no confidence currently. It seems the only plan that Starmer has is to grant amnesty to those people coming here illegally.
Yeah, fundamentally there's two ways that I think you could actually deal with this problem. One is the offshoring the migrant issue, but to do that you need to be able to find a country that on the face of it sounds unpleasant enough, which is why somewhere like Rwanda was chosen, because people associate it with genocide. That's why it was chosen ultimately, I think, personally. Despite it potentially being safe now, it elicits a negative feeling. Or deal with the issue with France and make sure that they're stopping people from coming over, because that is an actual barrier, but the French don't want to do it because if they come over, they're not their problem.
But my point, actually, David, is that a deterrent is if you've got a country that you set your sights on making your home and you can't settle there and you get shipped out to somewhere else, of course that's a deterrent. Why isn't it? How wouldn't it be? You haven't got to the place that you were dreaming of.
No, indeed. But
That's
going back
What's wrong with that?
But there is no confidence, and that is because the government hasn't spelt out what they want to do. I want to move on to matters more domestic, if I may. Sainsbury's is trialling bigger self-checkouts. I thought the idea was that we were getting rid of all these stupid things that go bleep and say wrong item in bagging area. But Sainsbury's is trialling bigger self-checkouts with conveyor belts, so they replace the human cashiers. These are new hybrid self-checkouts, the moving belt for shoppers to load their groceries onto a bigger bagging area. Wait for this. There are going to be very few shop staff so that you can say, excuse me, where are the tinned tomatoes? You have to go, wait for this, to an iPad, which is going to be stuck in one of those stupid aisles where you type in where it is and it tells you the location. What are we doing in terms of society?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different issues at play here. I think I'm going to show my youth by saying I don't think I've been in a Sainsbury's and not used a self-checkout for a long, long time. But my major gripe is that you have to take the receipt to scan it and then put it in a bin to get out. That's really annoying.
Oh, I've not seen that.
If anyone from Sainsbury's is listening, please get rid of it. I don't want to take my receipt.
Ah, but more supermarkets are implementing that because of the number of people who are nicking stuff. So do you then have slidey doors that open once you put the receipt in?
Or have more security staff? I don't know. There's other ways of dealing with that.
Use AI.
I'm less annoying.
AI could be greatly implemented in supermarkets if you're not going to use people. But my bugbear is still when you have to wait for 20 minutes to get a bottle of wine signed off.
Yes. I agree. I had that yesterday. It wasn't wine, but it was beer.
Yeah, it's irritating, isn't it?
You just awkwardly have to spin looking for people for 5 minutes.
While everybody looks at what you're wanting to purchase.
Yeah. There is another story as well. This is from Wrap. Says UK households throw away nearly 100 billion pieces of plastic packaging a year. And essentially they want to ban plastic on 21 items, including tomatoes, apples, potatoes, bananas and carrots. Weirdly, I agree. And this goes back to how we used to shop when I was a child. You would go into the greengrocer, you would pick up whatever you wanted, they would weigh it or whatever they did, and then present you with the cost of that. Now, at the moment, people are overbuying because if you buy lemons, they come in a bag of 20, and I don't want 20, I want 2 lemons. I actually think there's public appetite for this.
So there's an education thing at play here, I think. If peppers, for example, very few meals are you cooking where you need 3 peppers, but that's always what you get in the package.
Right. There's a green one, a red one, and an orange one.
But you can buy them loose, and that's almost always cheaper, but people feel, I think, maybe like it's unclean, and that might be the major issue. So you need to make sure people know that it's both cheaper and you're not going to die of some really niche disease.
Well, we've got 2 options. Let's go back to either paper bags, which are fine, and we can make them out of recycled paper, or bring your own bag. It's not difficult. I mean, I think about even my child's nursery. There is no plastic in that nursery.
Good.
None. And I believe in that, and that's how it should be. And she isn't used to plastic, and it won't occur to her to, wrap food in plastic because it seems weird, and it is weird. And we don't know about how much plastics damage us anyway.
Well, that's very true. I just want to move on finally to one more topic which I saw. This is your lot again, a Labour-run council has banned a bonfire at fireworks event after neighbours complained about smoke.
This makes me sad. I mean, look, I'm Northern. When I was a child, we used to throw effigies of Maggie Thatcher on the bonfire every bonfire night, and, it's a great tradition.
Right. But, no, how can you have a fireworks night without a bonfire? It's absolute, it's political correctness gone mad.
These people are so boring. They're just anti-fun on everything, and you look at the potential... Look, I'm not a fan of vaping, but they want to get rid of basically anything that you inhale, anything that you drink, anything that brings anybody some semblance of joy, and we're going to live in Rachel Reeves' high-tax nightmare where none of us can do it.
The only thing I was saying is that there are only certain things you can burn that are, non-polluting. So just stick to that. It's wood.
Yeah, and on Guy Fawkes Night, you need a bonfire. Thank you very much to both of you. Nikki Hodgson, journalist and author, and Noah Khogali, Conservative councillor for Strathern. Let me know.